This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The UK and EU reached last-minute Brexit landmark agreements. Another new COVID strain found in Nigeria. And South Africa facing bigger second wave of COVID-19. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. Also coming up this hour, South Africa's interest rates dropped by 3%, the lowest in 50 years. And Nigerian UFC sensation Adesanya unknown in his backyard despite martial arts superstardom. The United Kingdom and the European Union have reached a post-Brexit trade deal 4.5 years after Britain voted to leave the EU. Strenuous negotiations took almost a year, with the agreement coming just days ahead of a year-end deadline when the Brexit transition period ends. European leaders say they are relieved, while the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says his country has taken back control of its laws and its destiny. Benji Haya has this roundup from Brussels.
1,645 days since the referendum, 328 days after Britain officially left the EU, and 7 days before a cliff-edge deadline. The Brexit deal is done. After a difficult negotiation, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called a press conference with Chief Negotiator Michel Barnier to announce the news. This, she says, was a deal worth fighting for.
We have finally found an agreement. It was a long and winding road, but we have got a good deal to show for it. It is fair, it is a balanced deal, and it is the right and responsible thing to do for both sides.
Ms von der Leyen added that the UK remains a trusted partner and that cooperation will continue on issues including climate change, energy, security and transport. Michel Barnier offered a more sombre tone. He expressed sadness but relief that the clock is no longer ticking. On the other side of the English Channel, elation. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson promised to get Brexit done and clear the way for an oven-ready deal. It was the mantra that helped his Conservative Party win a landslide victory at last year's general election, and just in time, his pledge has been kept.
A deal that will protect jobs across this country, a deal that will allow goods, UK goods and components to be sold without tariffs and without quotas in the EU market, a deal which will, if anything, allow our companies and our exporters to do even more business with our European friends.
The PM stressed that the deal guarantees sovereignty for Britain, an end to free movement and an end to Britain's relationship in the customs union and single market. And crucially, he claims, regaining control of the UK's fishing waters, albeit after a 5-year transition period. This was for months a key sticking point, yet both sides managed to reel each other in until a compromise was made. But questions remain for businesses and the impact this will have on financial services. Even with a deal, many economists argue that the UK's and the EU's GDP will take a considerable hit. And even with the I's now dotted and the T's crossed, the drama is not over in Brussels. By the end of the year, the Council has to evaluate the deal. Then it's got to be ratified by the UK Parliament and the European one. There could be some late nights ahead in the Belgian capital. Benji Haya, CGTN, Brussels.
And on the streets of London, reactions to the deal are mixed.
I think it's brilliant. I mean, it was a mistake to try to come off the union in the first place, but that was what most of the people decided, and we've done it, and we just got to get on with it and make it as profitable for ourselves as possible.
Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose given the kind of circumstances, it's better to have a deal than no deal, but I think after this year I just don't think anything's going to quite make it right until there's a vaccine. But in terms of the Brexit, then yeah, I suppose it's best to leave with something.
It's taken them 4.5 years to get there, and how many prime ministers have we gone through to get to it? I don't know what the deal is, I don't know what's involved in it because I have just heard it, but should never have left.
CGTN's Benji Hai is live in Brussels and joins us for an update. Benji, the EU ambassadors are meeting on the post-Brexit trade deal breached with the UK. Which key issues are they discussing today?
Yeah, the EU getting the ball rolling really quickly here. Ambassadors meeting just the day after that deal was agreed. Of course, it's Christmas, but the work continues. And the reason being is so many deadlines were missed. And of course, it all has to be done and tied up before the 31st of December. So an element of urgency here in Brussels. We're not seeing the likes of German leader Angela Merkel or French President Emmanuel Macron convening. This is a meeting of the EU ambassadors just to check that they're okay with the contents of the deal. And they're going to try to get through everything. It seems like quite a bit. It's a 2,000-page document. Although before people think that this is an impossible task, they have been briefed quite consistently throughout the process. So this should be a case of just approving what they already know, essentially, and then moving on to the next steps. And as you heard in my report, there's plenty more hoops to jump through in order to make sure this can all be put in place on January the 1st. But the fact that the deal is done already brings a huge amount of relief to those here in Brussels. And the next couple of stages seem to just effectively be formalities.
Okay, but you did mention those hoops, Benji. So will everything be ironed out and ready before the transition period expires on December 31st?
Yeah, it's expected that everything will be in place. Of course, not much time left. And as I mentioned in the report, there has to be a series of votes and ratifications. Though what's key is that those can happen provisionally and retrospectively. So whilst the ambassadors have to approve it here in Brussels, MEPs in the European Parliament might not get round to actually voting on it until next year. But there has been several clauses and waves in place to ensure that that can be done and that the deal can still go ahead on January 1st. Additionally, given the fact that this deal affects all EU countries, traditionally there would be a vote in every single national parliament in the European Union. There's not enough time for that, and so MEPs will get the chance to reject the deal if they want to, but they won't have a chance to amend it. So it's expected that they will approve it and it will pass, even if that is done retrospectively in 2021. And over the Channel in the UK, MPs are being called back to Westminster, the Houses of Parliament, in order to vote on it in person on the 30th of December. Quite ironic, to be fair, that the British members of Parliament have for years discussed every intricate detail of the deal, that prime ministers have lost their position in office because they couldn't get the right requirements. And here we are pushing through something with very little scrutiny and not much time left. But it is expected to pass through the UK Parliament, the European Parliament as well, and be signed and sealed by the EU Council here. And any sort of period afterwards for businesses to get used to the new deal will be put in place, but not for the European Union. Effectively, what that means is that on January the 1st, this is a go, this is happening, and all sides must be ready.
All right, Benji, we appreciate that update. Thank you very much. Benji Hai live in Brussels. Now, the full text of the Brexit deal is yet to be released. It will go into force when approved by both sides. For a glimpse of what's in the deal, here are the main focuses.
Just days before the deadline, the UK and the EU reached a deal on their future business rules. For their separate markets, the two sides agreed to trade without extra taxes put on goods and no limits on the amount of goods to be traded. The deal also covers their trade last year, worth £668 billion, or over $900 billion US. This brings some relief to UK companies hard hit by the coronavirus pandemic, but they will need to comply with both UK and EU standards for future trade, which rely a lot on the EU market. Fishing rights, another stumbling block, saw compromise. The deal reduces the EU's fishing in British waters by 25%. A quarter of the EU's catch by value will be repatriated to UK-flagged vessels, seen as an exchange to their access to British waters. The cut will be phased in over 5.5 years. After that, there will be annual negotiations about who can catch how much fish and where. The deal mainly focuses on trade, but changes will also be brought to UK nationals who live and work in the EU. They will need EU visas for stays over 90 days. Short-term business travelers must have a work permit. Experts warn those who still work in the EU for limited periods of time might face fines unless they get advance authorization. British students won't have convenient access to educational resources. Except for Northern Ireland, the UK won't continue to participate in the Erasmus scheme. The university exchange program helps EU students study in other countries. The deal is expected to take effect from the beginning of next year, and many involved will have to adjust to the changes sooner, not later. Li Jingyi, CGTN.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Let's go to Nigeria, where another new variant of the novel coronavirus seems to have emerged. The head of the Africa Centers for Disease Control confirmed this, but warned that more investigation is still needed. The news comes after Britain and South Africa both reported new variants of the coronavirus that appear to be more contagious. This has led to new travel restrictions and turmoil in the markets. Director of Africa CDC, Dr. John Nkengasong, said the Nigerian samples that the organization is looking at are based on very limited data. He also said Nigeria CDC and the African Center of Excellence for Genomics of Infectious Diseases in Nigeria will study more samples. CGTN's Deji Badmas joins us now live from Lagos for more on this. Deji, what more do you know about this new strain and where has it emerged from?
Well, the first thing to say, Peninah, is that there's still no clarity on this and nothing is clear yet. And the head of the CDC here actually addressed it, and talking about the head of the Nigeria CDC now. He addressed it at a press conference last night. And what he said is that, look, that when the UK strain was announced, that's the new strain in the UK was announced, that what happened was that because the NCDC here is working in concert with that, in collaboration now with that African Center now, is it African Center for Excellence in Genomics now? It's a private organization now. He said what happened was that that center, when the new strain in the UK was announced now, that the center had to look at its historical archives of viruses that had been sequenced. And in the process of that investigation, it discovered two viruses now that had similarities with the new strain that was announced in the UK. So what he said is that what they intend to do now is to investigate this further, that they're going to take samples of other new viruses now out there in the society and do more sequencing to try and investigate if there's any similarity at all, just to try to explain this. So, and that this samples actually came from two individuals. So he said it's difficult at this time to reach a final conclusion, and that people do not need to panic because nothing serious has actually been established at the moment. And then he made it clear that, look, mutation of virus it's common, that the most important thing is to look at is its transmissibility and how virulent the new strain might be, and that's what they're investigating. Peninah?
Okay, so Deji, how has the government reacted to the news and how prepared is it in dealing with this new strain?
Well, I think the Africa Center for Excellence in Genomics is it's a top center, and the NCDC, of course, as I said, has allayed fears at all that people do not need to bother, that they're investigating this. So the NCDC is actually in control of this. It is driving the process now in collaboration with that center, which, of course, as I said, is a private organization and owned by a private university here. So we just have to wait and see until that process, you know, the process of sequencing of the new viruses. I mean, the samples the NCDC boss said they are going to collect. After the sequencing of the samples of the new viruses, then a clearer picture would emerge. And he said that is when he would come out to address this plainly for people to really understand. So at the moment, there's no clear understanding about the new strain, and that is why the Africa CDC would appear not to be very categorical on this. What we know at the moment is that these two samples now actually came from two individuals from the state of Osun. Osun State is in southwest Nigeria, but as I said, the NCDC has made it very clear that there's nothing categorical yet on this, and that further investigation is being conducted to actually get a clearer picture of the supposedly new strain. Peninah?
Okay, all right, Deji, thank you for that. Deji Badmus live in Lagos. We earlier spoke to Dr. Ngoy Nsenga on this. He starts by explaining what the new strains mean.
Is the same virus, but with a kind of variant structure. So we are basically talking with this about the same COVID-19 virus. However, this virus has gained some new kind of structure in his molecular structure. So that's why we in scientific term we call them mutation. Mutation means the way the structure or the molecule, the proteins adjust in the structure of this virus has changed. Sometimes the location, or sometimes have changed the acido amine that make it the structure. So, but at the end of the day is the same virus. First, we understand from the UK team that this variant has been in circulation since I think September. So since September, I'm sure people have moved from UK to other places, and the likelihood of the virus reaching other countries, be it in Europe or in other places, is very high. And that's one. Then two, even if we take the hypothesis that that did not happen, and now with the restriction, is always very hard to completely block, restrict the virus from moving from one country to another for several reasons. It can move with people moving, because you can restrict passenger flight, but you are not restricting, for instance, cargo flight or other means of exchange between countries. So it's very hard to restrict the virus from changing or moving from one country to another. That's why we emphasize the only best measure to protect ourselves and to protect our countries is for each and everyone to adhere to what we call the preventive measure, including hand hygiene, wearing of masks, and of course, social distancing.
The Health Ministry in South Africa has warned that the rate of coronavirus infections in the country will soon surpass the peak hit in the first wave earlier in the year. The Southern African nation is battling with a new, faster-spreading variant of the respiratory disease. Positive cases increased by 14,046 on Wednesday. Tulisha Balala has more.
South Africa is facing a bigger second wave of COVID-19 after the health department identified a new virus mutation. The health ministry says the proportion of tests that come back positive had risen to 26%. That's around double the average rate of infection the country had seen before December, when the virus had showed signs of waning. Some citizens around the country are concerned.
Here comes the second wave, so I don't know whether the health organization will manage to deal with it. I don't know, but we're just pinning our hope that maybe a remedy will be found so that they can cure people, because I see a lot of people dying.
The South African government is reviewing the current restrictions and will consider further measures to curb the alarming spread of variant 501v2.
It is getting worse, but the fear now is that the people, they are not trying to protect themselves. You can see that most of the people, they regress.
It is not easy because every time we're going to be with a COVID patient. Yeah, we're dealing with the COVID, nothing else now. We no longer any sickness that we know it's COVID all the time. You know that you are at the risk with the patient all the time.
South Africa has over 900,000 cases of infection. Government has condemned large social gatherings and urged residents to sanitize, wear face masks and social distance. The Africa CDC, though, says while the variant transmits quickly, it is not clear whether it leads to a more severe disease. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
To Kenya now, where this year's Christmas celebrations have been largely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic as Kenyans grapple with high infection rates, loss of livelihoods and COVID-19 protocols. Here's CGTN's Robert Nagila with the details.
On any given day, downtown Nairobi would be a hive of activity. Banks, offices, shops, all carrying out their business. But this is what it looks like on Christmas Day, virtually empty. An image replicated across much of the country as Kenyans mark the day. Traditionally, Kenyans come together with family and friends over a sumptuous meal and drinks, making merry well into Boxing Day. But this year has been different. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a huge impact on people's livelihoods, leaving many struggling to put food on the table. Data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics shows unemployment in Kenya shot up to 10.4% in June, from 5.2% recorded in March when the first case of COVID-19 was detected. The level of unemployment rose sharply amongst young people aged 20 to 29 years as employers rushed to cut operational costs. As a result, many Kenyans have been forced to relocate from urban centres back to their rural homes. But there is hope. A vaccine rollout is expected in mid-2021, and the Kenyan government says it will be free for all Kenyans. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
At the start of 2020, Africa was not seen as the likely home for inventions in portable hands-free sanitation chambers, oxygen-making machines, genome sequencing, drones and robots. And yet, here we are, witnessing something new as previously hidden talent of its youth thrive. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moi reports on some of the inventions that are helping Africa combat coronavirus.
We did it all here to build out facilities. We designed everything you see.
Some of Africa's young innovators saw COVID-19 as an opportunity to solve the challenges the virus imposes. In Kenya, a group of 16 students from Kenyatta University, daring to dream big, went a long way to develop a ventilator as part of efforts to combat coronavirus.
After we saw what is happening in the world, there's a challenge for ventilators, and there's a challenge with production of ventilators. We decided we could not sit down and wait at home or quarantine, so we decided to come up with how we can make a ventilator that will support and save lives.
In Uganda, necessity became the mother of innovation. Young minds in this East African country invented an automatic solar-powered hand-washing machine to help vulnerable communities keep off the virus. Another successful invention came in from Egypt, where a robot equipped with defined mechanics to take nose and throat swabs required for coronavirus testing was designed. The government of Tunisia also sought the support of a local company, Innova Robotics, to help enforce lockdown restrictions during the pandemic and slow the spread of the coronavirus. PGAD, which is remotely operated, is equipped with thermal and infrared imaging cameras, together with a sound and light alarm system. The robot was widely used in the Tunisian capital to help effect a COVID-19 curfew. In South Africa, locally made ventilators helped to save hundreds of lives in the initial stages of the outbreak, when there was shortage of such equipment internationally. Early this year, scientists who work at Kenya Medical Research Institute successfully sequenced genomes of SARS-CoV-2, the virus responsible for the global COVID-19 pandemic, obtaining important information about the genetic composition of viral strains.
We will take coronavirus when we are less busy. We'll put it through the machine and we'll be able to describe to you how it looks like. Whether it looks like the coronavirus in Congo or in China, or the relationship, or whether ours came first from Italy before here.
The successful genome sequencing was a significant milestone for the East African country in the fight against the pandemic.
Africa's young innovators continue to blaze the trail in fighting the deadly coronavirus pandemic, with many dreaming big and making the continent proud. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Coming up. At least 20 migrants drown after boat sinks off Tunisia. And the Central African Republic rebel coalition to observe 3-day ceasefire ahead of polls.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Tunisia's Coast Guard has retrieved the bodies of 20 migrants after their boat capsized at sea. At least 15 more are feared to be missing, including children. According to Tunisian officials, more than 40 people were on board the makeshift boat. Most came from sub-Saharan Africa. The boat was heading to Italy when it sank. Rescue efforts are still underway off the port of Sfax in central Tunisia.
We were informed that a boat carrying migrants sank, and according to initial data, it was carrying more than 40 people from African origin, and an investigation has been opened immediately afterwards.
To the Central African Republic, where a rebel coalition, the Coalition of Patriots for Change, says it will observe a 3-day ceasefire ahead of Sunday elections. According to a statement issued by the CPC, a 72-hour unilateral ceasefire will be observed across the country by all Patriots fighting troops. Here's CGTN's Wilkis Tanyaba with the details.
The Coalition of Patriots for Change rebel group is accusing incumbent President Faustin Archange Touadéra of trying to fix the vote. The group is demanding President Touadéra to suspend Sunday's polls. But despite the ongoing situation in the country, residents are still eager to cast their votes on Sunday.
Everybody was scared. Yesterday, there was movement. It was hot, but I still came to look for my card. There was nothing this morning, so I said to myself that it's going to be fine. So I'm going to go and vote on Sunday.
We don't know that the elections will take place on the 27th, but it's just as well to get your card out. You never know, just to be on the safe side.
Sunday's presidential and legislative elections are deemed a key test of the Central African Republic's ability to recover stability. President Touadéra will be vying for a second term in office. the United Nations Security Council has approved its Secretary General Antonio Guterres' proposal allowing temporary redeployment of 2 infantry companies and 2 military utility helicopters from the UN mission in South Sudan for 2 months.
This is to reinforce the operational capabilities of the peacekeeping mission in the CAR during these electoral context. And on the security front, the peacekeepers are continuing to actively engage in mitigating and growing threats from armed groups throughout the country. The mission is also continuing to provide support to the preparations of the presidential and legislative elections.
Electoral officials from the National Election Authority are also at hand to provide necessary electoral information and any growing concerns to the population coming out for cards. Wilkes Anyabwa, CGTN.
To West Africa now, and Niger hopes to make history on Sunday's elections. This will be the nation's first ever peaceful transition of power, despite a raging Islamist insurgency and economic woes. Niger has never had 2 elected leaders hand over power since independence from France 60 years ago. The country's last coup was only a decade ago. President Mahamadou Issoufou has announced that he will hand the baton to his elected successor. French President Emmanuel Macron has heaped praise on Issoufou, describing him as an example for democracy. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian says the quality of Sunday's elections will be a benchmark for the entire continent. On to Somalia, where the Electoral Commission has announced new election dates despite strong condemnation from opposition politicians. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello reports from Mogadishu.
The Federal Electoral Implementation Team has announced new changes to the election timetable for members of parliament and senators.
The election of the upper house seat will be held between 31st December and 6th January. The election teams at the federal and regional levels will commence registration and verification of clan elders and electoral delegates on January 7th.
As per the previous timetable, elections for new senators was set to take place between 1st to 10th December, with election for lawmakers due to take place between 10th to 27th December. Members of the opposition, among them more than a dozen presidential aspirants, have voiced their opposition to the Federal Electoral Implementation Unit, accusing the government of planning to alter the outcome of the presidential vote planned for early February 2021.
If inclusive elections do not take place, a government with no legitimacy will be formed. And if a government with no legitimate mandate is formed, this will in turn create political instability that can destroy the country.
Clan elders and electoral delegates will pick the 11th Somali parliament. This after leaders failed to agree on how to conduct a popular vote that will be the first in the country in half a century. Elections for senators will take place in 5 of the country's federal states. Regional parliaments will elect the senators.
The only way to end the electoral impasse between the government and opposition is the review of Electoral Commission representatives in both the regional and federal level. Opposition is accusing the government of appointing security personnel and civil servants in the commissions. The only way to this is dialogue between authorities and the opposition.
Election is expected to commence in regional states that enjoy close relations with the federal government of Somalia. Puntland and Jubaland are yet to confirm their participation, and it remains to be seen how the government will handle the fallout from the elections, with opposition calling for massive anti-government demonstrations in case the government goes ahead with the votes. Abdulaziz Bello, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Ahead in business news. South Africa's interest rates dropped by 3%, the lowest in 50 years. And Tunisair expects business activity to resume in 2021.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
We begin our business news in South Africa, where the property market is shaping for some decent growth over the next 2 years, driven by historically low interest rates. The repo rate was slashed by 3% between January and July during the COVID-19 slump, but the Reserve Bank kept rates steady at 3.5% at its November meeting. Despite this, properties are being snapped by entry-level buyers and those wanting to upgrade. CGTN's Tunisair reports.
South Africa's interest rates have not been this low for the last 50 years. A 3% drop in interest rates this year has made homes more affordable and helped the property market quickly shake off the COVID-19 gloom. Some financiers have seen a 20% year-on increase in bond applications, mainly from first-time buyers.
This interest rate phenomenon is driving a bottom-up demand cycle in our property market, and so it's the properties at the lower end of the price spectrum that are seeing the most demand. We see our average borrower borrowing about $80,000 US, $1.25 million rand, and that's kind of our sweet spot.
It's not just new entrants on the hunt for good bargains. The prolonged lockdown still has many working from home and a need for more comfortable and spacious lodgings.
We don't know when COVID is going to stop or when we'll ever get back to the normality that we once enjoyed. This has all accentuated the need for increased full title sales. So houses and clusters are more preferred, and we've seen a definite softening of the sectional title market, especially with 1 and 2 bedroom units.
Sentiment is also driving this market. The pandemic has brought the longevity of life into question. There's now an urgency around long-term decisions. Fred Venter is selling his home in Sandton Home to live out his dream near the ocean.
We've decided as a wife and husband that we want a different life going forward. And being from the coast, that's what appeals to me. And I want to move back to the coast, essentially, and in particular somewhere along the Cape.
South Africa's property market last saw a boom like this in 2015. Estate agents predict it will remain this way as long as interest rates stay low and consumer appetite doesn't wane.
For as long as we're in the single digits, we're in the boom time. So we've got a long way to go back to 10% from 7%. What we have seen with our Reserve Bank in the last 2 decades is when they have increased rates, they've done so very, very slowly. And so the Reserve Bank now is talking about potentially 2 quarter-point increases in 2021. That still means that we exit 2021 round about or below even 8%.
Activity in the luxury end, however, remains subdued. With the economy languishing deep in junk status, it's not likely to pick up until there's more certainty in the market. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Tunisia's national carrier is banking on the recovery of the aviation industry for a resumption of the normal pace of its business activity in 2021. Tunisair announced that part of its top priority will be to remedy the drop in the number of passengers, which have plunged by 70% compared to 2019 figures. Here's CGTN's Adnet Shawashi with the details.
The managing director of civil aviation at the Ministry of Transport and Logistics explains that Tunisair's strategic plan in 2021 will offer solutions to save the company, which is facing many difficulties because of travel restrictions.
The COVID-19 vaccine has given us hope. We are optimistic because controlling the pandemic will allow Tunisair to resume normal business activity in the second quarter of 2021. The repercussions of the global health crisis on aviation are unprecedented in the whole world. Several sectors depend on air transport, especially tourism in Tunisia, which is the pillar of the national economy.
Tunisian authorities will increase the company's capital while improving its financial balances. Aviation experts assert that a planned reduction in the number of employees is needed in the next 3 years.
Our vision is to make Tunisair a competitive company. That is why the state has put in place a structural reform plan to improve the company's governance and financial health. Creating a balance between the number of staff, the fleet, the airline size, and its commercial network is a top priority.
Analysts argue that Tunisair will lay off thousands of workers to ease the financial difficulties that led to the grounding of aircraft due to the lack of spare parts. The layoff cost is estimated at $63 million.
The social plan consists of laying off 1,200 employees. It was approved by the former government, but the number could be much higher to reduce the balance sheet. The norm in the world is that each plane needs about 80 employees, but at Tunisair, each plane has 165 workers. Overhiring has deepened the crisis in recent years.
According to the Transport Department, Tunisair will abandon unprofitable international routes next year. The state-owned company will stop serving some destinations in Africa and Europe following an unprecedented demand collapse due to the COVID-19 crisis. The Minister of Transport and Logistics has declared that the state will help Tunisair cope with the dearth of passengers amid stay-at-home orders in Europe. However, an urgent reform and development plan is necessary in order to save the national airline. Abdel Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
The growth of Nigeria's SME sector is viewed as the quickest route towards an economic rebound for Africa's largest economy. Nigeria's oil-dependent economy last month dipped into recession for the second time in 5 years. While oil prices have gone up slightly, the outlook remains somber for the country, where crude accounts for about 90% of foreign exchange earnings and half of the government revenue. From Abuja, here's CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam with more details.
From the designs to the construction of footwears, that's a trade Lawrence Odinaka has spent the past 6 years doing. The business earns him an average $150 weekly. He has also trained over 100 youths for free, but he's considering closing shop due to the disruptions caused by the COVID-19 economic fallout.
Before pandemic, the work, it was so amazing. It was so amazing and everything was flowing well. And then we are producing. As in a week, I do produce at least 20 pace in a week. But during the pandemic, everything falls back. Yeah, things really fall apart. And the thing really hit us down. Because we that are working with raw materials, we find it so difficult to even get materials. But now, during the pandemic, 5,000 naira I cannot see in a week. Yes, because everywhere was so shut down. People are still fighting on how to feed their family.
The small and medium enterprise sector has been supporting wealth creation in Nigeria. The National Bureau of Statistics reports that in the past 5 years, SMEs have contributed about 48% to the national GDP. The sector accounts for 84% of employments, but is now battling to survive. The combined impact of rising inflation, COVID-19 pandemic, and current economic recession have caused many businesses to shut down. Government has been making efforts to revive the sector through various interventions, but that hasn't yielded much.
It can be better. Like Oliver Twist, we are constantly asking for more. We cannot kill the government. The government herself was also caught unawares. Government is introducing the survival funds of 30,000. If you have staff of these 3 and above, you can access it so they can help you so you don't go down. They're also helping you to give you waivers for tax and so on so that you don't disengage your staff. But they need to do more to increase consumer spending. Government needs to do more to increase production. It needs to engage the private sector more to see whether the private sector can help extend the financial inclusion.
Nigeria's weakened SME sector has translated to massive job loss, rise in poverty and insecurity. Experts are certain that SMEs remain the surest hope to kickstart Nigeria's economic recovery. They're asking government to engage industry players in driving policies that would support and boost operations of SMEs in the country. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Egypt's government has approved a $500 million loan agreement between the North African state and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development that is aimed at supporting social housing projects for low-income people. The loan is a part of Egypt and World Bank's Inclusive Housing Finance Program, which has benefited more than 280,000 households across the country since 2015. CGTN's Yasser Hakim examines the measures Egypt's government is taking to tackle the housing problem for the middle and low-income earners.
The expensive real estate market in Egypt has prompted many low-income earners to build illegal houses. By 2013, the number of informal settlements exceeded 1,200, hosting about 22 million people. It places a huge burden on the country's infrastructure and had become the epicenter for drugs and crime. Once in office, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi embarked on a mission to eradicate these illegal areas and slums.
There were strong intentions to solve this issue, unlike with previous governments which have failed to stop the spread of slums. The first phase concentrated on eradicating the high-risk living areas, which house over 1 million people. 95% of them have been evacuated and developed into modern housing projects. It's worth noting that what was spent on this from 2018 to 2014 was about 652 million Egyptian pounds, which is an extremely low amount. The current leadership spent 17 billion Egyptian pounds from 2014 until now and is still spending more.
The inhabitants of slums are moved into newly built modern cities with all required services. To avoid the recurrence of this problem, money from the state budget and support from the IBRD are used for building social housing units for middle and low-income earners under the slogan of the 1 Million Housing Units Project.
This project was done at a massive cost of 250 billion Egyptian pounds and was used to build 1 million units at a rate of 300,000 units per year for the youth, the divorced and widowed women, and also medium and low-income earners. The country subsidizes 60% of the unit price and provides payment facilities for up to 20 years. For rent, it's as low as 450 Egyptian pounds per month.
The Egyptian president has vowed to fulfill his promise during elections of a house for every Egyptian by 2030. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in sports. Nigeria UFC sensation Adesanya unknown in his backyard despite reaching martial arts superstardom.
The year 2020. It was a year like none before, shaped by the COVID-19 pandemic. Africa, seemingly spared the worst of it, still took a huge hit, with unprecedented disruptions to healthcare, the social and economic order. Climate change also took its toll on Africa. Shifts in temperature affected food productivity and the availability of water, and the overall security of the African people. The continent saw major political changes too. Several countries held successful elections despite the pandemic, while others made strides towards lasting peace. This was 2020, a year unique in so many ways. CGTN will highlight some of the top stories we covered as the year unfolded.
Invasion in several parts of the country.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find